This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. Brought to you by the Fort Hall School of Government, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 29th of May, 2020, and I am 2J.
I'm Tom.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, in Uhuru State House, a goose is cooking. In the Standard, Ruto splits Raila and Mudavadi. And in the Star, Uhuru to make final decision on Dwale. Shall we begin with what's cooking in State House?
Absolutely.
Right? So the Daily Nation, I'm sure you've all seen clips flying around of the president giving an exclusive interview to NTV and the Daily Nation.
Yes.
And he was very charismatic in this interview, and there were lots of anecdotes from his personal life. The interview really did a good job of humanizing him as the head of state.
Definitely.
And, you know, his fear of corona and, you know, Mama Ngina getting corona from his son and whatnot.
Yeah.
Valid fears altogether.
Most definitely.
And that he has tough choices ahead of him in terms of opening up the country politically. But the article is brilliant because the author seems to be really enamored by Uhuru Kenyatta.
Too enamored, if you
So
ask
much
me.
so he says, his gift is raw, down-to-earth star power, a 10,000 watt gap-toothed smile, the familiar laugh with a head thrown back, and an almost compulsive tactility.
Yes.
It's too much, because there's another part where they say the nation raises this not to flatter Mr. Kenyatta, but because the way he wears power so easily is at the heart of his success as a politician.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that these things aren't true,
but it's
And listen to this, they say, few people walk away from Mr. Kenyatta without thinking, I like that guy.
And that guy likes me.
Really likes me.
And I think this is the true value of Uhuru Kenyatta here. He's very charismatic, and that's the person we saw in 2013. And we see glimmers from time to time of this really like down-to-earth, relatable guy.
Yeah.
Interestingly, he gives a very chilling reminder, and he says, the president says, don't let your ambitions of tomorrow cloud what you must do today. Because what you do today is what shall determine where you shall be tomorrow. And this, they said, was a direct hit at his deputy.
Absolutely.
Those in the party that are not, you know, doing what they're supposed to be doing or abiding by party position. And interestingly, I think in many ways, people mistook Uhuru Kenyatta's silence for weakness. And now he has woken up and he is saying, I'm here to clean up
he's
shop.
made clear, very true.
And so he outlines three main things as his priorities in the next 2 years. One is his record, two is his legacy, and three, national unity. And I think they're pointing towards, you know, constitutional change and BBI type things. So we wish him all the best. And I think the interview is on Sunday. I look forward to watching it and getting some insight.
Yeah, GK sounds like she now really believes in Uhuru Kenyatta.
I'm just interested to know who the goose is cooking. Is the goose from Sugoi? Is the question.
And GK, that's a valid question. You know, but you know, and the reason I'm saying that is because you see, the picture painted of Uhuru Kenyatta is this man is very charming. And if you read the history of Uhuru Kenyatta, it's a man who has very much rewarded his loyalty to his allies. If you are loyal to Uhuru Kenyatta, he'll remain loyal to you. And if you see William Ruto where he is right now, it means something happened. And there was some form of betrayal.
And we're seeing the repercussions now.
Well, great headline.
Yes, we have a three-part criteria that we're going to use to break down the headlines. We will ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
I think it's a tick on all positive three.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, so we'll start to see the goose.
The goose cooking.
In the Standard.
Yes, Ruto splits Raila and Mudavadi, and the Standard is telling us that they have come across information that Ruto has been trying to split Raila and Mudavadi, and they speak of some beef in Parliament, and they say that the Standard has reliably learned that ODM Minority Whip has ignored ANC's list in Parliament. And that yesterday's ANC's PG, Parliamentary Group Chairman Ayub Savula, said that Mudavadi has asked him to tell members that the party plans to withdraw membership from allocated committees.
My God, I feel like Mudavadi always reads the room wrong.
Let me tell you, I think this guy is playing a game.
Okay.
He's playing a game. And the game here is to decoy Ruto. You see, if you look at it this way, there is nothing William Ruto will achieve with Musalia Mudavadi for two reasons. Okay. One, if they come together as the Kalenjin and the Luya vote, they cannot even make 5 million. If they all voted 100% for one candidate, they cannot even make 5 million votes.
Yeah. So you're saying the coalition partner is not is not a good mix.
Yes, and also let's be honest, the Luya vote from time immemorial has never been bankable. The only time it's been bankable is 2002 when Michael Kijana Wamala was running for VP. They don't come out to vote even beyond 65% or 70%. Right? Now, as to why would Mudavadi be a viable person to go for? Maybe William Ruto thinks he has a sizable gamer chunk and he just needs a little bit of 30% of Luya votes to happen. Yeah. But it's not going to happen.
I think we've, over the past few weeks have seen the undoing sort of the DP. And maybe this is him sort of reaching out to at least one political ally, because it seems like he is by himself.
He has no friends, no allies.
And
this is kind of what the Star touches on. It says Uhuru to make final decision on Duale. So as we all know, there was a meeting that took place at State House yesterday, which is in the run-up to the National Executive Council meeting for the Jubilee Party that's supposed to happen at some point next week. But the Star says it's supposed to happen anytime from Friday to Saturday, and that's to set the parliamentary group. And so here, it's just a reiteration of what they said, I believe, on Tuesday. What Tuju said, that they're going to be cleaning house, that they're going to make changes, and ultimately the boss will have the final say. And at this point, they're just kind of targeting Duale as a person who may be cleaned out in this process. However, they go again to talk about how the DP allied MPs will gate crash State House if any meeting takes place. They don't want to be left out. But then again, they question this idea that the DP has 146 members of parliament in the National Assembly, which I think we have brought up time and time again. It's not possible. So I think the Star is pointing to the fact that slowly, as you're saying, GK, the DP is losing these allies that he thought he had very strongly.
Exactly.
I will say though, I think the Star needs to get it together. This is almost a regurgitation of the story that they had on Tuesday.
So shall we toss it based
I think
on
we
that?
toss it,
So Star goes. Who do we give our winning headline?
Daily Nation.
Yes,
Daily Nation? The Goose of Sogoi.
I love it.
Our winning headline. Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a three-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy?
Yes, and Daily Nation. Who is this fellow over here? This is Ndula. And you have a caricature of Raila Odinga. and he is, what do you call it? The guy who...
It's an eye test.
It's an eye test, but the guy who carries out an eye test, it's not an optician. What is it called?
Optometrist?
That's the term I was looking for. And he is carrying out a board, the eye test, the big R, it's the word Raila. Big R, small a, I, and the smallest L-A. And the guys who are trying to read, number 1, Babu Owino, second, Musalia Mudavadi, and third, Aisha Juma. Babu Owino definitely can read Raila very well. Mudavadi, I don't think so. Aisha Juma cannot.
He looks perplexed.
Yeah, and Aisha Juma was just chucked from, I think she was chucked as from a committee. Anyway,
it's a NASA loyalty test.
NASA loyalty test. And it's a lovely thing. So they have all thrown their glasses over there, and none of them seem to be actually able to read it.
And I think that's exactly how Raila envisioned it.
Absolutely.
But they cannot.
Interesting cartoon.
It's a beautiful cartoon.
Onto the Standard.
We have Kaso again. But where's Gado, guys?
Maybe he's gone to Tanzania.
Maybe
he sneaked into
there.
Tanzania. Yeah, because he didn't want Magufuli to see him. Anyway, Uhuru Kenyatta is playing bowling, and there he's rolling a ball, and the bowling bottles.
Bowling pins.
Bowling pins. Yes. Figureheads. Aden Duale, the ears are so conspicuous, just like mine. William Ruto, Murkomen, Sudi, and behind Moses Kuria. And the bowling ball is labeled 2020.
Oh, gosh.
I think it's a strike. It's a strike. It's a strike thing there. And I mean, look at it. I think what Kaso is trying to tell us is Uhuru Kenyatta has the power right now to say who stands in 2020 and who doesn't.
Exactly.
Who doesn't. And the figure guys what do they call them? What do you call them?
Bowling pins.
The bowling pins. They underestimated him. And that's why they're actually in the
You really read into
line of fire, right?
Yes, they're in the firing line.
Okay. Yeah, I will applaud Kaso on the cartoons of this week. Very well job. Yeah, well done.
The Star.
Yep.
The Star, you have, what's her name? Millicent Odhiambo. Caricature of Millicent Odhiambo. I don't know how I recognized her first, but anyway. Next to her is Senator for Narok, Olekina Odama. Next to them is caricature of Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. And next to them as well is a caricature of William Ruto, who has been trapped by a mousetrap and he cannot move. And the caption there is how high. Now,
oh my God.
The context here is Millicent Omanga, when she was being grilled by Jubilee, was it NECO NMC, whatever it was.
That was very entertaining.
Yeah, she was asked about her loyalty and she said,
and their numbers.
I mean, when they ask you jump, you just say how high do you jump. But I wonder how she's able to jump. Anyway, was a school and this is Olekina. Olekina cannot jump.
Oh man. Yeah. Okay, but they've all come back to their party bosses and said
they've all come back to their party bosses.
But poor Ruto can't jump even if he wanted to.
He can't pass the loyalty test.
Oh man, I really like this cartoon. I think we should give it
It's fantastic.
That's fantastic.
Great cartoons today, very good.
I think we give it to the Star Ozone.
Absolutely.
Agree, you have it.
Yeah.
And what is our final thought?
And now our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled The State of Africa. We've been doing it this entire week. And it says, the caption there is A History of 50 Years of Independence by Martin Meredith.
Nice. Allow me to summarize the week.
Yeah.
So we looked at this book, The State of Africa, or The Fate of Africa, as it was previously called. And Meredith's main argument is that the predatory leadership of many African countries has been consistent and has impeded substantial development. I don't know if we agree. He acknowledges the role of Western countries have played in these development challenges, for instance, lending their support to brutal dictators such as Mobutu during the Cold War, and unfair trade policies which prevent Africa's agriculture from being globally competitive.
Right.
So on Monday, we looked at the Gold Coast experiment of Ghana and the revolt on the Nile in Egypt and the White South of South Africa. On Tuesday, we looked at the first dance of freedom, looking at the first generation of nationalist leaders, such as Nkrumah, Kenyatta, Nyerere, Kaunda. And we also looked at death of an emperor in Ethiopia and the fall of Selassie. We also looked at the birth of nations and the story of Che Guevara in the Congo. On Wednesday, we looked at red tears on how Ethiopia navigated drought and famine, and we also reviewed Somalia and Black Hawk Down, and South Africa's time of triumph. On Thursday, we went on to look at Rwanda with a chapter named The Graves Are Not Yet Full, and then also looked at the lost decade, where we saw how Africa's steep economic decline in the 1980s happened and what were the resultant policies thereafter. And today we close out this book.
Yes.
Fantastic. You know, I was reading this book. I was like, this guy, he thinks he's Vasco da Gama, comes to Africa and tells us what he thinks of us. Anyway, he writes a chapter called A Degree in Violence. And it's about Robert Mugabe. But I won't focus much on Martin's accusations of Robert Mugabe as a violent man who killed his people and dispossessed white people of their land. After all,
it was not their land.
It was not their land, and the British colonialists did a lot worse to Africans across Africa, and therefore, sweet revenge is probably the best considered medicine. But what I'll focus on is the long game. What was in Robert Mugabe's mind in 1980 when he became Prime Minister and later President of Zimbabwe. You see, there was a degree of cooptation by our forefathers in Zimbabwe and in Kenya. In Kenya, Jomo told the white settlers that they could remain and do their thing. In Zimbabwe as well, Mugabe told the settlers they could remain and do their thing as well. Now, in Zimbabwe, there was a man called Ken Flower. He was the chief of intelligence of the Rhodesian government. Now, this man plotted Mugabe's assassination numerous times. But you know what? Mugabe still retained him. And one day, Ken Flower was giving a narrative. He was giving a story of the first time he met Mugabe. So he meets him and he starts giving him the stories of when the Rhodesian government wanted to kill Mugabe, the numerous times that they tried to kill him. And Mugabe sits down and he listens. And after Ken Flower is done, he laughs and he says, yes, but they all failed. Otherwise, we would not be here. And do not expect me to applaud your failures. Second is a guy called Ian Smith. Ian Smith was a leader of Rhodesia. And in a publication, he says that he speaks about Mugabe and he describes him and he says, he behaved like a balanced, civilized Westerner, the antithesis of the communist gangster I had expected. If this was a true picture, then there could be hope. Now, there was something Mugabe did here. He had done his thing with the white people, with the British people, but he realized that he needed to co-opt them to be able to form a solid economic base. And this is what, allow me, before I go to my thesis, allow me to read what Mugabe said. He did it for a reason. He said, we recognize that the economic structure of this country is based on capitalism. And whatever ideas we have, we must build on that. Modifications can only take place in a gradual way. Now, what did he mean here? That if he had to co-opt the British, who he had fought for a long time, this for one reason. He recognized that the global structure of the economy was largely based on capitalism. And therefore, our methods of production were not equal to what the white man could produce then. All right. Now, it is the same thing Jomo did. You had to come to the realization that you had to bring these fellows who had actually persecuted you for a long time, bring them together to help you. And I want to just state some little figures from independence. By the time Jomo was coming in, Kenya needed about 56 million sterling pounds to do education, to do transport, to do roads. That was our budget. But you know how much Jomo had to play with then?
How much?
2.5 million sterling pounds.
Oh dear.
A deficit of about 54 million sterling pounds.
So what does he do?
Definitely, you all just needed to borrow from the British. You needed to borrow from the West to be able to keep up. After all, they all recognized that you cannot start from scratch. You just needed to accommodate that which existed within your space to be able to survive. But also as well, what also Jomo did was create a black elite. And you don't see that much in Africa. A black elite that possibly mimicked the white colonialist, but the black elite that somehow could give hope to the hustlers of the day and how we know them now.
So they just continued from the bad lessons that they had learned. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying, it was a necessary evil to create a black elite.
Well, of course, if you were to say that for Kenya's context, that seems about right. But for Zimbabwe?
Zimbabwe did not... He let
anyway. I was looking at
he let the white elite. He let the white elite exist for a long time, and maybe that was the original sin. He started the land reforms that he started about what in 1990, 10 years after independence, but took root in the year 2000. And if they took root in the year 2000, the original sin is that he did not do it early
enough. Okay. All right. So I will take a look at chapter 35, entitled "Out of Africa." So this section. Part 4 has started to move into the more recent decades, and this chapter starts out in post-apartheid South Africa. So we see that following this euphoria of democracy in South Africa in '94, Nelson Mandela spoke very optimistically, not only about how South Africa could enter this new era, but how the continent could do the same. So while he was addressing the OAU summit in 1994, he recited the suffering that the African continent had gone through as early as the Roman times, acknowledging that many modern African leaders had added to this toil of misery. And he said in this speech, "We know that we have it in ourselves, as Africans, to change all of this. We must assert our will to do so. We must say that there is no obstacle big enough to stop us from bringing about an African Renaissance." And so we know that this idea of the African Renaissance was not new. It had been a common theme in the early 50s and 60s. But later this idea was then taken up again by President Thabo Mbeki during his term, and he turned it into a personal crusade. And his aim was to improve the image of Africa and South Africa in order to attract foreign investment. And so in order to make this a really concrete idea and very palatable to the West, Thabo Mbeki and a bunch of other African leaders created this thing called the New Partnership for African Development, also known as NEPAD, in 2001. And so here they pledged themselves to promote democratic principles, popular participation, good governance, and sound economic management. And at the same time, you have Gaddafi, who says that he wants to use the OAU to rehabilitate both himself, because at this point he had been really put into an isolated position, but to also create himself as this leader for Africa. And so he reveals this plan for the United States of Africa.
Correct.
You know, this new currency that is a continent-wide one. And later we see the OAU being replaced by the African Union. And so what I found most interesting is that you have these bursts of what I would call white guilt that was happening throughout the decades. So you have the Live Aid concert that happened in 1985 during the Ethiopia famine. You have Bill Clinton, who has this Africa strategy talking about this class of African leaders who he saw were, you know, these democratic, you know, drivers in 98. Then you have the G8 concerts in 2005. But a lot of these were very short-lived. And all of these things are, you know, pointing towards this international enthusiasm to save Africa. And he says in the book Martin Meredith, which I found very condescending, the emphasis above all was on the need for Western action. The prospect of Africa escaping from precipitous decline depended heavily on international assistance. The magnitude of the crisis is too great for African states to resolve by themselves. There is more. In reality, 50 years after the beginning of the independence era, Africa's prospects are as bleak as ever. Already, the world's poorest region is falling further and further beyond all other regions of the world. Okay, this is the point where I closed the book at this point, because all I felt that he was saying is he was making a call for Africa to be recolonized. And I think it goes back to the title of this chapter, Out of Africa. You know, these savages who need modernization, who need the West to come and save them.
Need to be civilized.
And I feel like throughout the week, this is kind of this underlying theme that we've been talking about, this very condescending tone that he takes on. And so 2M, when you talk about how, you know, keeping the whites here, or you know, following in their footsteps was a good thing for us, I don't think that is necessarily true.
I actually, let me tell you, I actually did not say that. I actually hate, let me tell you, this book, the moment you read, just burn it. Because I find it condescending as well. But there's something also to blame within the African. The African allowed this to happen. Have you ever seen, for example, an African talking about how Europe progressed? It's always a Mudogo telling us how Africa progressed. They actually have the nerve to write the state of Africa, a history of 50 years after independence. I have never seen an African writing a book.
Because we never would. I don't think that's how we view our history.
But you know why? Because we have, as the state of inferiority, an inferiority complex. Africans have an inferiority complex. That is why we are able to accept structural adjustments and say, oh, because the IMF have said so. This is so, then we must do so.
So let me ask you then, are you saying that Jomo Kenyatta's only option when he had that deficit of 2 point whatever million pounds, his only option was to borrow?
Yes. His only option was to borrow. How else would you raise our capital? You see, let me tell you, Jomo was smart. And not just Jomo, the political elite around the ruling class then. If you needed to progress as Africans then, you needed to appropriate white symbolisms of power. And that's why we call it a black elite, because we had people wearing pinstripe suits, we had people wearing pocket chiefs, and they all had huge ranches and behaved exactly like the Muzungu behaved.
2M and 2J. I also have a final thought.
Please, what is your final thought?
Sorry.
Interesting debate and very valid points, I think, from the two of you. So in the, still in the last chapter of this book, he gives a peculiar history of Kenya's political happenings. And he begins with the fall of Daniel Arap Moi, who he says was obliged to stand down after 24 years in power. And then you have Moi's successor, which was Mwai Kibaki. Now he says, and I quote, "But no sooner had Moi's cabinet syndicate of Kalenjin politicians departed than they were replaced by Kibaki's Mount Kenya mafia of Kikuyu politicians."
Very good, very good.
Right? And so he goes on and he tells us how, you know, now Mount Kenya mafia came, set up these lucrative deals, Anglo-leasing, all that stuff. And then he leads us into 2007, where he describes, you know, our clashes and all, how Kenya was almost was at the brink of civil war, and how, you know, an election was rigged. This is not new to you as the audience, obviously. But he also goes to say that, you know, this explosion of violence very nearly destroyed Kenya. And I think on that point, he's a little bit right. Because I think every 5 years, this country comes to a screeching halt when we do elections. There's this cyclical political induced violence. But I think this inspires us with this new conversation that we're having with BBI. People have politicized the campaign to change the constitution, but I think we should remove politics away from it and decide to see what can be good for Kenya, so that we can stop. How else can we share power? Does it always have to be 50+1? I don't know if you agree. But the idea is, how can we explore ways in which we can all come to the table?
Absolutely, I agree. I agree, GK.
So now, as Mount Kenya Mafia left, I wonder, what are the mafias now? Is there a Hustler Mafia? Or a Dynasty Mafia? Or is the Kanu Mafia still reigning? The Cabernet Mafia or Syndicate? But interesting. But I think the other thing with this book is, it's a Mzungu writing about our history. And so he obviously doesn't go deep enough to understand the nuances.
Not at all.
In the bid to summarize and tell us many stories, I think he missed out a lot of key details. So guys, on a day where we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation,
I'm tossing my cartoons.
Good. And a winning cartoon from the Star. We watched a very, very interesting commencement speech by Jim Carrey yesterday, and he said, the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. So be kind, be a blessing to someone this weekend, and have a good one. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Pang Free to Air, and Star Times.
Preach more.
Amen.
Amen. Bless.
Happy birthday weekend to him.
Oh, wow.